Welcome to Ladies Who Launch, not your average business podcast. Dropping every other Wednesday, Alyssa and Dakota are two successful and opinionated marketing entrepreneurs engaging in insightful conversations with industry thought leaders, as well as casual conversations surrounding our lives as entrepreneurs.
Welcome back to another episode of Ladies Who Launch. Coming to you on a lovely Monday morning here in the city of Calgary, in the province of Alberta, and country of Canada. Here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
I mean, sometimes I wonder where we are, so sometimes I need assistance in order to remember where we are, because every day's a journey here in the world of Alyssa and Dakota.
Every day is a journey.
Yeah.
It is. And especially today where Dakota's suffering from a bit of a migraine due to all these weather changes. And we're both on our periods.
Yeah, we are.
Me, third day for Alyssa.
Yep.
And we're feeling kind of energized, but not really.
Well, yeah. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Yeah. So
it's almost like we plan these things.
Yeah, sometimes.
I
think it's our goal of ours to be better at planning what we want to talk about. But we also like to leave it open-ended.
Yeah. But yeah, we're gonna talk about how your period affects your life, not just like your physical life, but your professional life and all of those things, and how when you're working and running a business, how you can actually
work with your period and
sort out your work styles through your menstrual cycle, and how it affects your work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think one of the things Alyssa and I are always kind of chatting about lately is we feel like as we get older, our menstrual cycles tend to get worse. So for me in particular, I've noticed extreme lethargy in the first couple of days, as well as really bad cramps, like worse than I've ever had. And according to my doctor, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just a symptom of getting older.
Yeah, you're in perimenopause, like all late 30, early 40-year-olds are. Like, mm-hmm. I think we can probably start there. And I will use a little anecdote that I posted something on Instagram a couple of weeks ago. And somebody was talking about it was something to do with perimenopause or something, and blah, blah, blah. And I'd made the comment of like, yeah, tell me about it or something on the story. And I had several of my friends reply to me. They're like, oh, you're too young for that. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, ladies, I think we need to have a conversation about our bodies here. So I found a doctor through Instagram, and she specializes in menopause and perimenopause. And I used one of her stories to go back, and how she said, like, menopause can happen at anywhere between 45 and 55, and the average for menopause is 50. But perimenopause starts 10 years prior. Like the symptoms for that are 10 years prior, that can start before you get into menopause, which means actually missing your period or ending your period, right? And so she's like, it's totally normal for women of 35, if you start your menopause at 45 or whatever, to be in perimenopause. And like people were responding like, I had no idea, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, ladies, can we start learning about our bodies and how they work? And that you can be in your late 30s in perimenopause. And I think this is where the disconnect is that we as women either aren't asking the right questions of our doctors and saying like, yeah, I'm 36, I'm 38, I'm 41, like I'm in perimenopause. And if your doctor doesn't agree with that, get another doctor. Because honestly, I think a lot of doctors are misinformed about the process of entering menopause and the start of perimenopause being like a decade prior. And so find a doctor that understands your hormones and your process. So I'm not saying that she's your doctor or not, Dakota. I'm just saying that, yeah, you are and can be and probably are in perimenopause. And we shouldn't have to be going to the doctor saying my periods are worse, they're different, other things are going on, and the doctor's just like, oh, you're fine. Because that isn't actually the case, because you are entering a whole different phase of your life. And unfortunately, so many doctors don't understand it, even if they're women, because I was shocked at how many of my friends responded to that and was like, I had no idea. It's like, so that's step one, is ladies or people who identify as women or whatever, learn about your body and learn about perimenopause. Perimenopause and menopause are not the same. And you are not 50 in perimenopause. You are in your late 30s or mid 30s or whatever, entering in perimenopause. So that's step one, people, is learn about the process, because what Dakota is saying is totally correct in that everything starts to change now. Your periods become different. They're still regular and everything. You haven't entered into any of that, but because your hormones are different, and your hormones being tested may be still in the normal range of whatever they give for hormones, but that doesn't mean that you already haven't started that process. So anyway, sorry to diverge for that, but I think we need to start with that baseline that we as women need to start understanding our body and where we are, and that we're not 25 anymore. I mean, if you are 25, great, have at her. But most of us aren't 25 anymore, and we have to understand what is happening.
Totally. And just a heads up for those of you who might be wondering very high level what perimenopause entails and the typical age. Alyssa's right. It usually starts between ages 40 and 44, but it can also begin with some women in their 30s. And it is marked generally by changes in menstrual flow and the length of your cycle. And I know for myself, when I was younger, my cycle would last a little longer. And I definitely didn't have as bad of cramps. Now, I would say I'm the most regular I've ever been, which is kind of cool. Because for me, if I did decide I wanted kids, apparently a marker of being able to get pregnant in some respects is they want you to be really regular. So one thing that I know about me is my period comes exactly when it says it's going to come on my app that I have. And without fail, it always arrives the day that it's supposed to. And it always lasts the length that it normally does. But what's happening now is my period is getting shorter. So it's usually a 5 to 6 day thing. And then the first 2 to 3 days, 2 days, I would say, are really painful. And then usually it starts to kind of go away, and then it comes back full force on like the 4th or 5th day. And then it completely clears up within 24 hours, which is interesting. But every single time is the same. And the other thing too that I've noticed is sleep problems and hot flashes. For sure. I've definitely had some issues with temperature fluctuation and over the last little while. And that's why I really like cold plunging, because it helps me to regulate my temperature a little bit better. But I do notice that I get really warm really easily sometimes, like in a way that's completely inexplicable. And I joke all the time that I am premenopause because of the hot flashes. So, but at the same time, don't let the word perimenopause scare you. It doesn't necessarily mean that like you can't have kids anymore.
Nope.
And it doesn't mean anything bad necessarily. It's just a state. It's just a phase of your life that you're probably entering into.
Yeah. I mean, perimenopause doesn't really have anything to do with kids or no kids at that point, because you're still menstruating and you're still having a cycle. It's just understanding that the symptoms that you're having, like what started for me was super itchy skin. And I thought I had like eczema or anything like that. And no, like severe skin irritation and dryness is a sign of perimenopause. Like when you start looking up the symptoms and you're like, oh, and it's like things that you wouldn't ever attach and think it's perimenopause. Could be anything. Like I know a lot of women will start getting ringing in their ears, like that's an itchy inner ears. And that's sort of a sign too. But for me, it was like and itchy, like feet, like the bottoms of my feet are super itchy. And yeah, I always thought I had some sort of weird fungus. It's like, no, so yeah. The hot flashes is one, but yeah, like things that you wouldn't normally associate. So that's sort of, where we're at. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with that. Oh, you're entering perimenopause, you can't have kids. That isn't actually the case, because you haven't stopped ovulating or your cycle. So no, that's why, yeah, you can have kids into your 40s. It's totally fine.
Exactly.
But generally average, I mean, and a lot of this is hereditary too. So you can always ask your mom, like when she entered menopause, like when she started having periods, and then you can sort of in your head go back 10 years. And if you're in that range, then you kind of know, because a lot of this is, you can follow what happened to your mom is kind of what happened to you, or what will happen to you. So you can, I mean, and if your mom's in your 70s like mine and doesn't remember, well, then that's the conversation. She's like, I don't know. She's like, I know it happened, but yeah. I'm like, okay, that's great. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. Well, you can also ask aunts or whomever, like other people in your family, or like a close friend. It's actually Family Day today here in Canada. And as we know, family comes in all shapes and sizes. So you could ask any woman that you trust, it's a little bit older than you, to kind of talk about what you may have gone through, or sorry, what they may have gone through. They may not be obviously related to you, but still.
But just be aware that you're likely entering that or in it, and don't be shocked or afraid or anything. But I don't think women understand. I mean, women always hear about menopause and think, oh, that's for like middle-aged, like older ladies. But there's a process to get to that. And that is what most of us are in, is the process of getting to that stage. And just being cognizant of what that is, because you have to become your advocate for yourself. And I think it's where a lot of women in particular get pushed off, because they don't advocate for themselves properly in terms of their symptoms and their issues. And like right now, I know a lot of women are probably thinking like, why am I so grouchy? Why am I snapping at people? Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's all part of it. Because like Dakota said, your cycle changes so much, like your actual period changes, but your PMS, your premenstrual syndrome changes as well, because your hormones are so different in this stage of your life. So that's partly why.
Well, and that brings me to kind of the general topic of today's conversation. So how amazing would life have been 15, 20 years ago, even when we were in high school and junior high, when we got our periods, if we knew how to work with them? And I didn't really start exploring how to work with my cycle until probably about 2 years ago. And then even then I fought it. I was like, well, I'm used to just letting it happen. But at the end of the day, like there's 3 major phases that women go throughout their cycle that span over 4 weeks, that we don't really pay a lot of attention to unless we're trying to get pregnant, for the most part, I would say. Now, this isn't everybody, but I would say the majority of women don't really pay attention to these pieces unless they're trying to conceive a child.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, in each of these phases, we go through different things and we have different levels of energy and productivity, that if we knew how to track and be in those cycles a little bit better, we would probably have an easier time with productivity. We would have an easier time with motivation. And we may not be as frustrated when we hit the moments of exhaustion, because we're, say, in our follicular phase or our luteal phase, or certain aspects of the other parts of your cycle that just make you exhausted. Like the first day of your period, it is absolutely okay to have what they're now calling a girl rot day, and just be lazy and relax. Like that would not be a day that I would personally recommend for you to go and do a heavy day of work, or start like a triathlon or a half marathon, unless perhaps you're just somebody that gets a lot of energy on the first day of your period. I don't know anybody who does. So learning to work with your cycle and learning to track it for more reasons than just to conceive is a really interesting concept. And really, it just has everything to do with your hormones and just how to really work with the different phases. So I kind of wanted to dive into each phase and what it means for productivity, and kind of what I experience and hear what Alyssa experiences. But the other thing I want to get into down the line in this conversation is what to do and what not to do during your period, because there's a couple of other trends happening right now in the wellness and health world that are catching on. One of them being cold plunging and saunaing, and then the other one being fasting, that I recently learned can be deeply affected by your cycle as well. And in fact, if you fast during a time of your cycle where you're losing a lot of blood, it's actually really dangerous. So you really have to, in addition to, being good about tracking your cycle and what's going on in your body, if you're planning on introducing fasting or any sort of new wellness practice into your dynamic, if you are a woman or if you identify as a woman and you do indeed experience a cycle, you do have to be really careful with that, because it can do more harm than it can good. Right, Alyssa?
Yes, that is very true. I think it's why, the fasting thing is interesting. It's why women during Ramadan do not fast during their period, or if they are pregnant, because it's actually detrimental. So out of the 30 days of Ramadan, if you are in your period for a week, you do not fast during that time. So yeah, that seems to be a general consensus, that probably not eating when you're losing that much fluid is probably not a good thing.
Exactly.
I'm not getting into the cold plunge thing because Dakota knows I hate it. So I will bow out of that discussion gracefully, because I have no interest. But
so I actually had a cold plunge planned for tonight, because I normally do go every single Monday. And my friend was going to join me, but I woke up with a brutal migraine just because of all these weather changes. And then in addition to that, like a mere 10 minutes after I mentioned the migraine to her, I got my period. So I was like, well, probably not a good time. That being said, usually after the first day, I will go for a cold plunge just to actually help with my cramps. I just don't stay in for as long. Because the whole thing behind that is, if you're losing nutrients and you're losing blood, you're also losing energy. And if you're shocking your nervous system in any way or not giving yourself the nutrients your body needs, so through the fasting piece, it can be deleterious to your health in some ways. Like, it can just make your fatigue worse, and it just will do the opposite effect of what you use those things to do. So, but
what are the phases? So let's start with the phases.
Yeah, let's talk about the phases. Okay, so between week 1 and week 2, for about 14 days, we're in if you're a woman, you're in your follicular phase.
And let's start by saying the first day of your period is day 1 of your cycle. Like, correct. So women have so you have a sense of where we're going in this, is like, when we're counting the days, day 1 is the first day of your period. So that, just to clarify.
Exactly. No, Alyssa's absolutely correct. So now, that being said, interesting. The research that I did is kind of conflicting right now. So it's saying that you're in day one is in your follicular phase, but apparently that's actually the second phase of your period. And it begins when bleeding stops. So essentially,
your fertile phase, that's when you get pregnant. Yeah.
The uterus is beginning to prepare for a potential pregnancy, and this phase can last for 11 to 27 days, but averages 16. And this is where I always get really confused with some of the resources that talk about cycle. And this is another thing that kind of enrages me, is I really feel like in school, there should be a specific course or like access point for young women to learn about how their cycle works. Like there should be more resources available to young women, because even to this day at 36 years old, I'm very confused about my cycle. And like when my doctor, like, please show of hands, tell us like on Instagram, every time you go to the doctor and the doctor asks you that question at your physical, when was your last period and how long does your period last? Like I literally like can't answer them in the sense that I'm like, I think my cycle is 26 days. It might be 28. And when I first downloaded the Flow app to start tracking my cycle, I had no idea. I was like, what? But I get my period every 3 weeks. Like, when does day one start? What is it? So it's interesting in that respect that I think it's still a very inaccessible topic. You could call it, well, period poverty, for example, and it's still a really big issue. But yeah, so generally within the follicular phase, you see a sharp rise in progesterone and estrogen, and testosterone will stay at a steady level, but may rise more towards the end of the phase. What that means is that you will, for the most part, have heightened energy during that phase, thanks to your rising estrogen levels. So it is a good time to learn and maybe add a little bit more to your plate to be productive and creative. This time is like if you're able to plan your work around like the difficult and complex tasks potentially happening in this time frame, this is a good time frame to get really, really tricky, big projects done. Whereas when you're in your ovulation phase, which occurs in the middle of your cycle and is the point at which your egg is released, even though it only lasts for 24 hours, you might feel a little bit different. Sometimes with this particular phase, you'll still have enough energy to be like extroverted and creative, but your brain might be a little bit fuzzy. So it might not be the best time to be ultra focused. And then there's your luteal phase. And this is the phase that you probably see on Instagram where people make a lot of fun of how low our energy levels are. It's essentially when our progesterone is spiked the highest. And so because it has a bit of a calming effect, your mind will probably be a little bit slower and your productivity levels are probably going to be a little bit low, which means this is a great time to wind down, maybe plan a vacation around this time, just because it's an opportunity for you to just chill out a little bit.
Yeah, those are, so when we're thinking about those phases, and let's just think about it from a work perspective, because that's what we'll talk about. Dakota sort of mentioned at the beginning about that, the first phase, what was it called?
The follicular phase.
Yeah. Like when we have all the energy and the ideas and or whatever that is, it's like you can actually, it's funny when you actually start paying attention to this stuff because you can see it in your own existence. And I know that I'm in that phase when I'm like able to juggle multiple things. And it's like, I like all my ideas are there and it's like, I want to do this and I want to do this. And all that sort of happens. And you have like more energy at the gym and like, you feel like you could run for 10K and it's like suddenly like, oh, wow, I'm like a superhero. And that's because that's what's happening in your body is because, yeah, your body's getting prepared for getting pregnant. And to be honest, too, that's when you want the most sex as well, because that's how nature works, is because that's your body preparing for pregnancy. So suddenly you're like, oh, I'm like, I want it all the time. And that's why. When you're planning your sort of workflow, funny, you can sort of look at your cycle in that way. And it's like sort of looking at maybe, so from our perspective as business owners, it's like, that's where I would start maybe prospecting for new clients or doing some initial call, like emails and things for connecting and all that kind of stuff, because your creative juices are kind of running and you're kind of feeling confident in your abilities. And it's like, I feel like I could take on the world. And like, that's kind of the focus of like starting projects. And maybe that's the week or whatever you want to get out and do all your coffee meetings and see people. And Maybe that's when you want to, whatever, because you know that the week after is going to just be a massive plunge and you're going to struggle to get out of bed and you're going to struggle to not have brain fog all the time. Brain fog is a major issue for me right now. That's one of my perimenopausal symptoms is brain fog. Like I cannot multitask like I used to. But you can prepare for that. So you can use those days maybe as your admin days or your like writing days or things that like sort of those tasks that you have sort of left, those can be for that week because you're not going to be in a place where you want to be out meeting people or booking meet, like that kind of stuff. So you can start looking at your work flow from those particular phases, and you'll find that your work performance is better because you're doing work that relates to those times of what you're feeling. And you're able to get more overall work done throughout the month by looking at it and changing what you're doing on those particular ones. It's quite interesting, actually.
It really is. Yeah. And now for those of you who still work a 9 to 5 and you've got a boss kind of driving your schedule, well, this is when I would say in 2024, we as leaders, or if you are a boss, we need to be sympathetic to the people on our team who are females. And we understand that they're going through this now. If we have a male boss, I think it's perfectly acceptable, if you've accepted a new job or you, even in your current job, I think it's perfectly acceptable to outline your boundaries and productivity points with your boss. So for instance, I know in a lot of jobs now, I am seeing more and more the opportunity to speak up about, I'm not the greatest at working early in the morning. And this is kind of the type of worker that I am. So I'm going to come into the office at 10, but I'm going to stay till 6. Or I'm better in the morning, so I'm going to come into the office at X time and I'm going to stay till X time. Now, it's not to say that every single month when you get your period, you're going to be able to just stay home. It's just more working your tasks to your advantage, as Alyssa was saying, during the different phases so that you can be more productive at your job. And if you are an entrepreneur, a small business owner, you do have the luxury of somewhat manipulating your schedule to your advantage. But we bet that if you kind of give this a chance and maybe schedule your work accordingly, there's a good chance that you'll feel less frustrated with yourself and your brain and your body during those times when your hormones are a little bit different and you find that you're just not as productive as you normally are.
Yeah. And I think even just starting to learn that about yourself and about what about the different cycles that you have, I think is already putting yourself ahead of the game. And if you're not tracking your cycles, like I would recommend doing that. You can use various apps, like Dakota says she uses Flow. I use Period Tracker. I think there's Clue. There's various different apps. I know in the States it's a little sketchy because you don't want them tracking your periods because they have a whole kettle of crazy down there. But in Canada, it's not a worry. You can even do it on a calendar, but like just pay attention to those times because it really is interesting. Like Dakota said, we're both on our period now. And when I got mine, how long have we all had our periods, right? For decades. And even Dakota said today she had a really bad migraine. It's like, oh, I have my period. And it was the same with me last week. I was like, why? Like, I just feel crap. What's happening? It's like, oh, yeah, I got my period. I'm getting my period today. It's like, we still do that. We still have that moment of like, why do I feel like this? And then you look at the calendar, it's like, oh, right. Period tomorrow.
Oh, that's that thing that happens to me every month.
All the time. And I'm just like, right. Like how many months have I dealt with this? And it still just seems like such a mystery as to why I feel so god awful this week. Because not all, Dakota talks about cramps. I'm not a cramp. I'm more of a cramp person now than I ever was in my youth. And I will say, like, getting off the pill was a huge change of that. Like when you're on the pill for an extended period of time, you don't have a lot of the heavy period symptoms because it's basically tricking your body into not ovulating and all of that, right? But when I got off the pill, and I was like, oh my God, is this what this is like normally? Like, what? So yeah, having to adjust to like cramps and things, but it's the same thing with exercise. Like Dakota was talking about cold plunging or whatever, but I won't go to the gym the first few days of my period because everyone's like, oh, it'll make you feel better. Yeah, it makes you feel better the week leading up to, like if you can get out and do some cardiovascular exercise or whatever leading into your period. That's really good because it'll help you sort of alleviate some of the symptoms. But on the first day and 2 days, I'm like, not only am I completely just out of it, but then this is something all women have to deal with. I'm always worried about leaking. So those are my 2 worst days. And I don't want to be at the gym and you're like in a leg press, like your legs are open because you're doing the whatever. And then you like get up and you realize, and it's like, so I just avoid that for social anxiety for one thing. But yeah, those are just not days that I like to sort of engage in activity. But then you're halfway through your period and you start to feel fine and you can sort of continue on. But just know what your limits are and what you will or and don't force yourself to do those things, because I think that's another thing is like, oh, I need to do this because I said I was going to. And it's like, just give ourselves grace. Like, I think the fact that we're women or trans men or whatever, and that we exist with this all the time and are in all kinds of, I mean, I've had periods in India and I've had periods in Japan. And like, I mean, that's a whole other conversation about dealing with that. I mean, we could have a whole episode on that. How to have your period in India. But anyway, we deal with this all the time and are like superhuman because no one knows in our existence of what is happening. And so like we're going through all this and we just go on with our lives. But you know what? Some days you do need some grace. And I think we should all just allow that for ourselves, because the fact that we are at work and we are skiing and whatever, on our periods, I think is pretty damn awesome for 2024, because women weren't always able to do those sorts of things and they still can't.
And I also just think like the fact that we literally are just now starting to openly talk about it is really annoying. But
it is.
At the same time, I love that we are. And one thing I will say is, for someone like myself, like I can't always plan, like I had a very heavy weekend of stuff that I needed to get done this weekend. And I knew that my period was coming. And so I tried to get the bulk of the more challenging stuff out of the way. And yeah, I still have a couple things I want to do, but today I'm just going to take it easy. Like I'm going to go for a light walk because I know that a little bit of energy will help me. But I also have a really bad migraine. So I'm going to give myself grace with that. And I'm probably going to have like a nap, even if it means like I don't sleep great later. Like just listen to your body. And then if you've got a spurt of energy later, do another hard task, right? Because you had a nap. And just don't worry about staying in the constraints, right? Of anything, just so long as you will be able to have a good day tomorrow. But as we close off this episode, I want to leave you guys with a really funny period story that happened to me last year. Alyssa was talking about leakage. And so I hiked the West Coast Trail last year, and in preparation for it, because I track my cycle, I knew that for the first 4 days of the West Coast Trail, I was going to have my period, which I really wasn't looking forward to, because you have to pack everything out from that trail. You cannot leave anything behind, meaning if you're using tampons, you need to pack them back out of the trail, and they have to sit in your backpack, wrapped up in, toilet paper and like copious plastic bags. So one of the girls on my trek said, well, she was going to use Diva cup. and she swore by it. She loved it. And at the time, I didn't realize that there were other options. I only thought there was the Diva Cup and it was the best option. What I failed to realize is there's 2 other really great apparatuses that have way better functionality for getting the thing out of you than the Diva Cup does. The Diva Cup I loathe. So a couple of months before the trek, I decided to test out the Diva Cup. Same time, I'm gonna get a little TMI here, because when do I not get TMI? Same time as I'm trying out this Diva Cup, I'm seeing a new fellow. And dude decides to sleep over, and I'm trying out my Diva Cup, and it's probably been, I don't know, like 4 hours. We go to sleep. I'm like, cool. I will, or no, I think it had only been like 2 hours. I had just basically tried it out before he got there. So we watch a movie, go to sleep, and 4:00 in the morning rolls around. I'm having horrific cramps. I get up. It's this dude's first time sleeping over at my house. And I go into the bathroom and I'm like, okay, I got to empty this cup because I know it's full. I literally cannot for the life of me get this thing out. Turns out I have a very high uterine wall, and where it's placed, the cup went up and over my uterine wall, and I could not get to the lip of the cup to unsuction it, to pull it out. So here I am in the tub. My bathroom is right beside my bedroom. I'm like grunting. Thank God the fan was on, trying to get this friggin' thing out of my body. And he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I just have really bad cramps. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, is there anything I can do? And like, part of me is like, maybe you can come in here. Maybe I should just ask him to come get this thing out of me. But again, like, we literally had known each other for a few months. And I was like, there's no way in hell I'm doing that. So I politely tell him I'm just like suffering and he needs to go home. So he politely leaves after trying to help me. I'm like, feel like I'm ready to explode. I'm so concerned that it's going to be like a friggin' horror show when we wake up, if we go back to sleep in any capacity. So I make him leave my house. I proceed to go to my girlfriend's house as soon as she's awake. She tries to get it out of me for an hour, like 2 girlfriends becoming the closest they ever can, and cannot get it out. And then I seriously consider calling an ex-boyfriend that I really trust to come and get it out, because I just don't want to go sit in emergency. And then finally I surrender as he's on his way over to like help me. This is somebody that I've known for years and years and years, and I trust implicitly. I decide then to call the nurse hotline, and they're like, just go to the emergency. The emergency people were amazing at Sheldon Schumer. They had me in and out within 20 minutes. They told me it's actually a very severe emergency. And the doctor was lovely. He was a dude, but like the funniest guy I've ever dealt with. Got it out, told me, don't be afraid, try it again. I will not be trying it again. And needless to say, that yes, there are many great apparatuses that you can use. One thing I will give the Diva Cup is I did not leak once and was going through this whole debacle. But yeah, I personally didn't love the Diva Cup. So
yeah, I have no interest in even going there. I know some people are like, whatever, but I'm with you. I know that would happen to me. There's no doubt. And I just don't want to, I bless that, but no, no. I just find, I don't know. Yeah, everybody's got their own thing, do your own thing. But I will say, if you are traveling internationally, bring your own things, because finding those items in other countries is not easy. So I'll just leave that at that.
Yeah, exactly. But
it's not all countries and women everywhere use tampons.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, yeah, being a woman's fun. But yeah, I hope we provided a little bit of levity, but also some insight into A, learning about your body, B, learning about your cycles, and C, learning how you can work with them and not against them, so that you're not always in a tangle of chaos and anger and rage as we can get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that being said, let us know if you guys have any feedback or you want to continue this conversation because it is really interesting. And we'll catch you next time on Ladies Who Launch.
Thank you for listening to Ladies Who Launch. Join Dakota and Alyssa every second Wednesday for more conversations and interesting guests. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. If you send us a question, we may answer it on a future episode.